is Gobi, and I'm the founder of LD Talent. And we are so glad to have you all here today. LD Talent engineers are very dear to our platform, and I'm very excited to introduce this topic of great cultural importance to LD Talent, of how we can actually put an end to world poverty of egregious forms within a generation. And so what I think is something that's very important to realize is that we have a huge racial power imbalance in the world, with the Western world controlling 60% of the wealth of the world and 50% of the GDP of the world. And as all of us know, there are brilliant people in places like Africa and South Asia, as well as Latin America and Asia in general, who are able to do the kinds of work that is done in the Western world. So there's no reason why we should be making so much less money. So that is the topic. And essentially what I'd like to do is start off with a question. I would like to ask you to guess or estimate how much wealthier is the average North American than the average person in Africa in dollar terms. How much more wealth do they have?
In terms of percentage, I can say about 300 or 400%.
300 and 400%. So that would be 4 times more.
Yeah.
Okay, any other guesses?
I would like to say something concerning that, because looking at your posts in the Medium blog you wrote, I think I saw 114 times richer.
140 times richer.
Yeah.
Right. And how much richer is the average Australian person, the person in Australia, than the average person in India?
I hate to say I'm just reading your Medium post,
yeah,
though, but
that's fine. Read it out loud.
50 times richer.
What was that?
50 times richer.
50 times richer. Those are ridiculous numbers. We are not 50 times or 140 times less competent than people in the Western world. So those numbers are ridiculous, and they're a result of a history. So that's what I'd like to start our blog with, is us realizing how much we're getting ripped off in this world, and us trying to come up with how can we actually create an effective solution to that within our lifetimes, within a generation, in fact. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to point out. So can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we think of poverty, we think of images like this. So this might be somewhere in South Asia, and such places in rural South Asia do exist. And
Yeah, this is in India.
This is probably in India. Of course, a lot of India, 300, 400 million people in India are not poor. They are in the global middle class. But the fact is that there are still 700, 800 million people who are poor. So this is a reality. And when we think of poverty in Africa, there are places in the world that look like this. I think this might be in Kenya. I'm not sure, but the fact is that we do live in a world that has places that look like this, and there's no place in America and no place in Europe that looks this poor. If you want to see what poor place is, the poorest neighborhood in Chicago looks like, this is the poorest neighborhood in Chicago. One of the poorest, Englewood. Do you have any comments on this?
That's not poor.
Oh, actually, this is like a town in India.
I want to be poor in Chicago.
Yes. I mean, I've been here all the time. So this is what I mean by when we say poverty, it really has to do with who is your family. Are you from an Indian family? Are you from an African family? Or are you from a European family and an American family? It is extremely stark. And those are the differences. So what I think should be our criteria for when we are satisfied. I'm not saying that we need to be greedy and have everybody be exactly equal. Inequality is okay. There's always going to be poor people and rich people in the world. But I think we should have 2 criteria. One criteria is no individual group or race or location should control more than half of the wealth of the world. Right now, the West, which is the European diaspora of the world, controls 60% of the wealth of the world. And everyone else, Asians, Africans, Latin Americans, indigenous peoples, they control 40%. But the West alone, the European diaspora alone, which is just 1 billion out of the 7 billion people in the world, controls 60% of the wealth of the world. And so that, I think, is one thing. The second criterion is that every continent, every group of people, the vast majority of the people in that continent should be able to live a respectable lifestyle and a decent standard of living, of enough food, clean water, clean infrastructure and housing, consistent electricity supply and energy supply, internet, quality healthcare, freedom and exploration, and universal education. So I think those are things that we can sort of say are requirements. The power balance and the getting rid of poverty, meeting certain minimum bars. So I'd love your feedback on these criterion before we proceed, or if you have anything else.
Yeah, actually, these are the basic necessities like water, infrastructure, and food and energy. This is a basic necessity, but don't you think this is all related to the politics in the different continents? Somewhere they agreed to control one power.
What do you mean?
For example, like if you see a politician, if how is a place exploited? One wants to be richer than other, right? One wants to be a world guru. One nation wants to be a guru of the other nations. Then they want to exploit other nations. So it is also in the small remote areas. For example, if someone wants to be rich in that area, he would try to plunder out by joining into politics or uh, doing certain stuff that would
Mm-hmm.
ruin their places, or joining hand with a businessman, or taking tender, giving tender to someone else. So this is how this exploitation happens.
So
Yeah.
I think I
So
get what you're saying. I think that essentially what you're saying is that the people who exploit and end up being very wealthy because of exploitation have a sort of mindset that they have a sort of ego that they need to show off. And,
yeah,
and that makes sense. I think that we're at a good place now with a good number of participants where we should take a small break to actually introduce ourselves. So let's go one by one. I mentioned I'm Gobi, the founder of LD Talent, and I'm just very excited about creating a diverse group of people who are from the majority world, who understand the real problems of the world. So let's just go a very short introduction of what your name is, who you are, and what you're passionate
okay, so let me start. So I'm Animes and I'm 20 years old. I do web development, and this is my passion, but also I like to see what's happening in individual level and spirituality, like how the people live in the life, and try to observe things out.
Great.
Not like there's any specific order, so I think I'll just go next. I'm Yinka Alabi. I'm passionate about plenty things. But for the sake of this call, I'll just say I'm passionate about IT, and also about how to transfer most of this other wealth to my side. Just kidding, right? But yeah.
Very cool. Thank you.
Okay, so it seems like nobody is saying anything. I'll say something. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
my name is Ewere Caleb Abia. I'm
Mm-hmm.
a software engineer here in Africa, and I'm passionate about solving problems using algorithms and things that challenge my thinking. And I'm a JavaScript developer, definitely, and I really love making things simple for myself. That's what made me get into this whole career. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Axel Yandilwa. I'm a software developer. I have interest in AI. Using AI to solve problems, human problems.
Mic check.
Yep,
Yes,
we
so
heard you. Thank you.
yes, so you forgive me, my video will be off. Kabanga Bill, software engineer from Kampala, Uganda, and I'm passionate about technology and providing solutions to the world through technology. Yeah, that's a brief about me.
Thank you.
Mic check. Hi guys, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So my name is Favor. I am software engineer from Lagos, Nigeria. Um, First of all, apologies. I can't turn on my camera. Like I don't have power where I am right now. In fact, my phone is almost running out of
That's
juice.
what we were talking about.
Yeah, but it's okay. So what I'm passionate about, whatever I can do to help people, um, either by writing code, if it helps people, whatever it is, that's just what I'm passionate about. Like just looking around my community and making an impact there, whatever capacity. Yeah, that's all from me.
Very cool.
Mic check. I'm Tolumide from Lagos, Nigeria. I'm a web developer at the moment. I'm actually passionate about web development itself. Computers, basically. My sincere apology about my video also. I'm conserving power. I'm actually intrigued about web development and genetic diseases, basically food drug discovery or anything. Yes, that's basically everything about me.
Thank you.
Mic check.
Hi, yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I check.
Okay. I'm Susanna Katude, software developer. I'm passionate about web development and yeah, solving problems. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you, Susan. Very cool. Now, that was wonderful. And I think one thing we noticed is that we have a group of people who are from developing countries, the majority world, who are extremely brilliant engineers who should be commanding a large amount of money from market opportunities. So I think let's go on. And one thing I just wanted to briefly point out about is I mentioned those numbers like 140 times richer and 40 times richer, but this is actually what it looks like. So this is the total amount of wealth controlled in dollar terms by each region of the world.
It's a very, very clear range. Like it's nothing it's not anything one would say is even close to being evenly distributed.
Yes, and one thing I'd like to note is that look at the populations. Look at the number of people each place has.
Yeah, definitely.
Here's if you scale it by per capita. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm saying this legal capital, this legal wealth, right?
Well, yes and no. I think yes, it might be legal wealth, but I think that black money is not more than double. So maybe maybe black money might double it. So India might be like closer to 7 or 8 with black money, and Africa might be closer to 4 with black money, 4K in this, but not much.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Per capita is.
This is per capita.
Yeah, it is totally.
Nominal GDP and there's a purchasing power parity. Like for instance, a piece of bread might cost less in India than in the United States. But well, that's not really what determines power, right? The thing that determines power is can you buy machinery, factories, industrial equipment, electronics, and those things you need to go by the nominal figure. So this is the GDP. The GDP looks a little bit better. And you can see how we do see a non-insignificant amount of wealth coming from non-Western regions once you start looking at GDP rather than the wealth. Wealth is essentially what has accumulated over the last 500 years, whereas GDP is per year. So we're in a better place now per year than we were in the past. Yeah. This is GDP per capita. So you see that the poorest region of the world in terms of GDP per capita is India. Africa is just ever so slightly richer per capita. And then you see just regions of the world that are much wealthier, but these regions are still not extremely wealthy. The West is still much wealthier per capita in terms of GDP. How are they producing so much value? Are they just, you know, 30 times smarter? How are they producing so much value per person that we're not able to produce?
Actually, what happens over here, I think, is GDP per capita is about peoples. And in India, there are lots and lots of poor peoples, and poor people produce more poor peoples, and more poor peoples produce more poor peoples.
Yeah, your point about population makes sense.
Yeah, population is all about that is making the differences every places.
So what I've been thinking is we are able to do good work in the majority world. By majority world, I mean the developing world. We're able to do good design work. We're able to do good software engineering work and other engineering work. So why aren't we actually able to get those opportunities? It's because in the West, there's a bias towards hiring local, and and but that works for designers and engineers. But there are still problems that the richest source of wealth in the world, the US corporate world, has that are unsolved. And so what I think is actually that we need to create engineers and designers in the developing world to be able to fill a talent demand, and hopefully the West will overcome some of its bias and hire more and more from places like India and Africa, but particularly Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda. But I also think that we and the majority world need to start seizing opportunities as entrepreneurs. We need to start starting the company, not just working for them, but starting the companies to actually seize upon this. So here is what I propose. So I'm going to propose what I think could actually bring an end to world poverty within a generation. What I mean by that is not that we're going to be per capita as wealthy as the West. That is not feasible. What I mean that is that the West will control less than 50% of the wealth. They might control 45% of the wealth of the world. And outside of the West, people will control together 60% of the wealth of the world. And the second thing I mean by that is that every region of the world, so if I go back to this GDP per capita figure, every region of the world, whether you're in Chad or the Congo or Bangladesh, will have a 10K GDP per capita. Once you start, I've gone to around 40 countries now, and once you start getting at a 10K GDP per capita, you notice that you don't have problems like extreme child poverty like this and like this. So that should be our goal, is we don't need to be greedy. We don't need to have unrealistic goals, but we should have the goal of 10K GDP per capita for every country and every continent, and also have the majority world, the developing world today, control over 50% of the wealth of the world rather than less. So what I propose is a slight modification to the development economics concept of conditional cash transfer. So conditional cash transfer is a concept where essentially governments would go out and pay poor families to send their kids to school. But of course, when you look at governments of poor countries, they themselves are going to have corruption problems. They don't have a lot of money. Who has the money? It's rich companies like Microsoft and Google. It's rich companies that have all the wealth. So why don't we create an organization through LD Talent that will essentially upfront that money to smart engineers and potential entrepreneurs? So the idea is, we as an organization, so I mean, LD Talent is one instantiation, but any startup, any bank, any social entrepreneur can do this. Just pay some majority world people from developing countries to learn engineering or entrepreneurship. And then connect those trained people with jobs for engineers or market opportunities for entrepreneurs. What exactly do I mean by market opportunities? I'll get to that in a second. But essentially help those entrepreneurs make money from huge market opportunities that exist. and then profitably and scalably grow this company. So you don't need any outside donor if you have engineers and entrepreneurs who are succeeding. You just take a fraction of the company that the entrepreneurs create or you connect those engineers to opportunities and charge the client who hires them a buyout or finders. So this is the idea that I had for how we can actually scalably do something within a generation about the problem we've discussed. I'd love your feedback.
No, I actually think it's a good idea, like training people. But how do you get market opportunities? Because a certain startup would only work where there are a lot of market opportunities at first. So as you had already said, it is in Western countries that have lots of market opportunities. So this
But
would be
that's what
an
I'm saying. You got exactly at my point. Developing world countries need to start startups that target Western companies who are their customers. So not connecting developers with opportunities, but actually saying Walmart has a problem, Google has a problem, and we're going to start a startup to solve their problem. And there is a company that has done it. It's called Zoho. Zoho is entirely based in Chennai, India.
India.
And they have created a team, but they're not targeting Indian customers. Their customers are all Fortune 500 companies in the US that have a ton of money. So what
Actually,
people
Zoho,
need to,
yeah.
so
Actually,
so
Zoho
that's
follows your
essential.
model.
Yeah, so
The model you're talking about.
So I think that there's $5 trillion of opportunities that entrepreneurs in India and Africa can capitalize upon in software and IT alone. I think there's another trillion in agriculture and fishing. And I don't mean just agriculture and fishing. I'm saying like IoT, technology driven agriculture that can, do very well in a modern world. And so right now, Africa has the largest amount of arable farmland that is unused in the world. That now amount of arable farmland is greater than all of the farmland used in the United States right now. India uses a lot more of its arable farmland, but Africa has a huge opportunity there. So entrepreneurs from Africa and India can start doing complex manufacturing. Particularly, there are areas of things that are not even that complex, like textiles, where the West has a huge cut because they're doing the designing and then they just send the instructions to Bangladesh to build, to make the cloth. But the West takes the huge cut. Countries like Sweden have a huge cut on manufacturing, and so that's one in textiles at least. And there are other areas of electronic manufacturing that could be done by entrepreneurs in India and Africa. Mining, huge industry Africa has so much oil that is not being, actually sold to the world. Okay, so there's tourism. Tourism is another $3 trillion in entrepreneurship that people in Africa and India can capitalize on. I mean, Morocco has done it to an extent. Transportation, Ethiopian Airlines is a great example. Like Zoho is for software, Ethiopian is doing a great job in transport. We should have more airlines that are built, airplanes and airlines that are built in places like India and Africa, right? We shouldn't need to use just European airlines. We should be able to build our own. Construction and real estate will automatically happen as countries get richer. But energy is a big area where, again, Africa in particular has a huge amount of opportunities where people in Africa, they're engineers, software engineers. If you just learn a little bit about energy, there's probably some money that you can make if you're sitting in Africa and, thinking about the size of these problems. Medical tourism, healthcare is extremely expensive in the United States and in Europe to a lesser extent, but mainly in the United States. So there are opportunities there. And then banking and fintech also automatically happens. We have M-Pesa, we have a lot of Kenyan fintech startups. But that's what I meant by market opportunities, is really that there are startups that you could start in 5 years, sitting in Kampala or Lagos or Nairobi, that you know, if you target Western companies, they have a huge amount of money. You can make a lot of money through that. You just have to compete with corresponding startups in the US. But the advantage you have is you have access to the talent in Africa and India, which is just as good as the talent in the United States, but is so much more affordable for you. So that's all I wanted to say. Why don't we see more companies like Zoho?
Yeah.
Mic check.
Yes.
So I would want us to also think about the political influence in this. So imagine if we had very many startups from let's give an example of outside the US, outside America.
Mm-hmm.
Don't we think at a certain point, let's say the government in America would try to come up with certain policies that would make it harder and harder for like startups from abroad to profit from the market in their country, or try to make it hard for like startups from outside the US to compete favorably with like startups in the US. So how do you think we would have to go about such a situation?
Interesting. Does anybody have a comment?
Because the reason I brought this up is I've been like reading about immigration issues.
Mm-hmm.
You realize that back in the day it would be easy for someone to, okay, not so easy, but at least someone would easily go to another country if they're a good professional. But these days it keeps getting hard and harder to migrate from one country to another. I think you also raised it in one of your points in the article. We're talking about the issues with immigration. Yeah. So that's why I was bringing in that point of the political influence and how maybe would think about going about the situation.
Right.
See, what I think about is if any idea that is coming up and it is costing less for one person, because what the talents you can get in India is very reasonable when compared to US, because in India the living costs are a little less than US. So if there's some work that is going on, like learning dollars is an example, so I think both the parties would be satisfied and the qualities would be met. And until and unless there's the political influence happens when you are big, it would not happen when you are small. So when you're starting small, there's nothing like to fear about political influence at all. But when you start growing big, and if you start trying to become something like Reliance or a bigger company, then you'll have to have some connections with the parties if they're traveling you. But I don't think at starting
Yeah, I
that
think
much
that makes
problem.
sense. But one thing I have to say to that point is just, what about China? China had to deal with all those trade wars over the last 20 years. But when the price of labor is affordable enough, I mean, the American consumer is not going to be able to reject your offers, right? Say you have a startup in Africa that's able to create a SaaS product to sell to Johnson and Johnson company in the United States, and Johnson and Johnson is going to pay them a certain amount of money. And say there's a startup in the US, the SaaS product in America, the SaaS product made in America costs $10,000 per month, and the SaaS product made in Nigeria costs $8,000 per month. Then maybe you might have a tariff situation. But if the SaaS product in America costs $10,000 per month, and the SaaS product made in Nigeria costs $1,000 per month, there is no way in hell that they're going to compete, even with any tariffs imposed. So there is a sort of global free market, but the political powers are not that powerful. How else did China become so rich? It's not like America wanted China to become rich. It just happened because of the market power.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in outsourcing that is happening, because Westerns are ready to export their software products to India. Like there are lots of companies in Bangalore and like TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, Wipro, and there are lots of people that they are employing that are actually they're
Yeah, but there's a
doing it.
difference there. There's a difference
There's a
there. They're just hiring the talent straight out. There's no entrepreneurship going on in India in that case, or in Africa with outsourced developers in Africa. The entrepreneurship happens when the people in Africa and India are creating the SaaS products themselves
Yeah.
and targeting the customers.
Mic check. So I personally, I feel entrepreneurship is actually a good tool. But, so basically, in many of those developing countries that you mentioned, uh, most of them or us have problems within the country itself that probably wouldn't support the growth of entrepreneurship itself. Might be political issues or something within that kind of country or high tax issues that bring in, because you might imagine setting up your business and you're working, and suddenly the government brings in a tax that is way above what you're earning or something, and also you might have to start thinking about the issue of power and other made the ease of doing business in your country much more easier. But because those kind of amenities are not available, then it actually itself kills the how do I put it, the birth of that kind of entrepreneurship. I hope I made my point clear. So.
That makes sense. What I'd like to do to wrap up our webinar is each person, give a comment or a suggestion of how we can help people, smart people in Africa or India, seize these market opportunities or demand for talent, and then we'll conclude.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, after listening to Gobi's talk and also reading his through his article on Medium, I can see where he's coming from in the sense of trying to spread markets around different sectors in the world and trying to export our intelligence out to the market like the US and everything. But I realized something, and I think we have touched it a bit, that in the easiest sector to do this as of now is the technological sector, because like other sectors, you guys mentioned political influence and some other deterrents. But when it comes to technology, there's really right now in Africa no taxes. Like the government doesn't even know how to control us. In quotes, to my point, they just see things work. They don't know what's going on, and they haven't put any tariffs in our in what we do, and that's why it's easy to export intelligence and software and whatever. Yeah, easy. When it comes to the other sectors, there is that tendency to be, should I say, to be exploited by the government and to be exploited by policies that will almost discourage you. So I feel right now my heart is set on I'm okay with the part of exporting knowledge and exporting IT intelligence. I'm really on board with that. But for the rest, I still can't see a headway towards those parts. From a simple startup, I can't still see a headway though. Thank you very much. That's what I want to say.
Mic check. I would like to buttress Everest's point. Personally, I love the whole idea of learning the language. One issue with one issue within the country, or within one thing that is common in a lot of African countries, is unemployment. And usually, it's probably because of the issues I mentioned earlier that make it probably impossible for entrepreneurs to grow and become larger organizations so that they can employ people within the country. But because of the fact that, yes, there are much more opportunities in other countries where your talent might be used, and then you don't have to travel there because you don't have to travel there. And that means you don't have to face all these immigration laws or anything. That means you can actually work from wherever you are, and then your talent is being used there, and then you don't have to worry about the whole issue of unemployment, because then you're able to think for yourself, and then you can be able to move on to higher things. So yes, I've just to support what Iberia said, I feel technology is the best thing from at least in my own opinion down here in Nigeria that can make that can bail us out of the poverty issue. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I just want to say something. I didn't say I don't. Okay, I don't. Not that I don't see a headway, but just that I want to see what Learn Dollars has to offer, because I still can't see a way out of it. So I'm looking forward, Gobi, to seeing your ideas come to pass. Really, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Check.
Okay, so I think what is being proposed is very good, and like everyone has said, like Ewe and Tolomedia have said, it's working in technology, and I think the target is we don't expect all that is being proposed to come through LD. I think what Gobi envisions is if you get a chance to be exposed to opportunities as an engineer, then 5 years down the road, you should be able to do something, let's say in agriculture or any other sector that is going to make a difference in your continent or your country. Yeah, so I believe in what is being proposed, and I really hope it can come to pass. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. Exactly. Exactly. There's huge $20 trillion of GDP growth from India and Africa that is needed to end this state of poverty. And it's on people like you to actually become, maybe you're software engineers now, but 5-10 years down the road, you're going to be starting companies that sell to the rest of the world and make money for your continent. Yeah, let's have a couple more. I think there's a few more people who need to speak, and then we'll go.
Yeah, just like the last person, I think that's Kabanga Bill said. I mean, lots of ideas have been shared generally from different people. I mean, the brilliant ideas, and sorry, forgive me, in usual fashion, I'm pretty pessimistic when I try to be optimistic, but at the same time, I try to be realistic, particularly when we try to take in mind politics and stuff like that. But like you also rightly highlighted, the case of China, for example. I mean, how did they grow? They're not yet where we would like them to be, but at least there's been significant growth over the years. And so I think the real key is not just that there are opportunities and that we should look into the opportunities. I think the real problem is that people are scared. Business is, I mean, going into business, as being an entrepreneur, it's risky stuff. You have to like be willing to take that risk because reality is you can lose everything, and reality is you can also gain so much more than you expect to gain. So it's people, being confident enough to take that risk. I don't know if I'm one of the risk takers yet, but time will tell.
There are ways to mitigate risk, but let's have the rest of the people speak.
Mic check. Yeah. As Alabi said, there is a risk in entrepreneurship, but if also our governments, especially the developing countries, if our governments could support, give us more support as young people to come up. I realize there is a lot of corruption, a lot of embezzlement, and it really takes us back. It's the corruption. There is a way corruption makes development come so slow, and you actually get to fear starting up something because something somewhere will happen and then everything will go down. Or maybe, like Bill said, you start up agriculture, like in our country back home. If you can start agriculture and then you get land and then the government takes it away like that, you understand, stuff that takes us back. So if our government could just come up, our government should support. You see, like in the US, you realize that there is a lot of people who are out there supporting startups. You reach out to someone and give in your idea, and that person is ready to support. Those are the people that we need back home. Yeah. And I think that's a way we can put end to poverty in some areas.
Yeah, one thing I thought is that it's sort of a chicken and egg, right? Like, if you to have most of the poor countries have corrupt governments. Most of the rich countries have slightly less corrupt governments. And so, which do you need first? Do you need the economic growth first, or the fixing the government first? And I guess that's a great point, Susan. Is that it would be great if the government could support entrepreneurship, but I guess sort of what my thought is that people have tried to change governments in India and Africa for over 100, like over 80 years. It's so hard. But what if we could just use the internet? What if we could use the internet to actually just sell directly to the market opportunities. Maybe agriculture is not the best example, but SaaS companies like Zoho. India has tons of corrupt government. But there's this company called Zoho, and they're making a lot of money from the US customers, US business customers directly. And they're doing the entire entrepreneurship, design, business, everything based in India. So in the same way, are there things like that could happen where we have entrepreneurs seize market opportunities even though their countries are corrupt, have corrupt governments. And then as the countries get richer and more educated, people will not be able to tolerate the corruption anymore, and they'll fix their government. But I think it is a chicken and the egg, and you're right that there has to be progress made in the government side as well. So, did you have anything in response?
Yeah, I get your point. That's right. It's all on us. We can just come up and maybe the government will find us there. But then when you look at people who are really poor in our country, they don't have education. Excuse me. There is no way they can access the internet. So oh yeah, like you said, we can start up stuff that can help them, but then some of them will die poor. You get that point? So it's a bit tricky, but then why not give it a try by using the internet?
Did everyone speak, or I think one person we have left, right? Yeah, we can't hear you.
I guess I agree with what everyone has said. Well, I actually don't talk too much. I kind of agree with what everyone has said.
So it's interesting. There's this comment here. So seeing from Tolimide, can you say your name again? Sorry.
Yeah, Tulumide.
Tolimide. So seeing ourselves as a solution, developing ourselves so that our skills are useful beyond physical borders, then an economic change can bring about change in the country. I think that's a great way to end this piece. Thank you, everyone. Animesh, did you have anything? Do you want to offer a concluding remark?
Yeah, I agree with almost everything, and whatever you said, what would you uplift first, economy or like changing the government? So changing the government is not in our hand, because people are like that, and they will choose people who are belonging to their own kind of thing. But you can, if they you give, you can do whatever is in your hand. You cannot change the whole country, but there's 5 or 10 people that you can see can make a difference to the world, and maybe that 5 or 10 people would later, few of them would make some more impact and will grow. So I think this is a very good thing. Like I agree with this idea.
All right, yeah, let's work as engineers, but let's also start some companies and sell to the world. That's how we make our continents rich. All right, thank you. I want to thank you all for participating. I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming out here. And I just wanted to get everyone's permission to be able to record this and put it on YouTube so that we can share with our people.
Yeah.
Yes, fine.
Go ahead. It's fine. Very fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, great. Take care. We'll stay in touch in
bye.
Slack. Bye.
Thank you. Yeah.